Well, hi everyone. This is Dr. Schroeder with this week's video introduction of week number 6 of our course in healthcare research. And once again, a very good week of discussion. We pretty much, for the most part, wrapped up our discussion of quantitative studies this week. And of course, the study we looked at once again was this Aiken study, talking about the continuing a discussion of the methodology and the sampling process that was used in the target populations. And everybody really brought up some good questions. And actually, as I brought out in the discussion this week, that's one of the really good signs of a good research study is that a good research study oftentimes poses more questions than it really answers. Sometimes you have to do a study to really find out what you don't know and to find out what the next avenue of study is. And this Aiken study is a good example of that. The results from the Aiken study are so broad and have such a large sample that although the results are very valid and statistically they're very valid and they do point out some interesting information, other than kind of sitting back and say, wow, here's what we know about outcomes and mortality and burnout and how nurses and a nurse's perception or burnout, there's not a lot that you can do with the information. Really, all that you know is that we've got some problems we need to work on here, and we have some new avenues that we can take. So that's really what the main point of this study was really all about. The study, in other words, didn't really have an end result in and of itself. It wasn't like the study was going to be the big seminal study on nursing staffing and burnout and just leave it there. The idea was to say, let's get some information. A little background of the study is the study was conducted in large part in response to what was going on in California at the time. Of course, this is a relatively old study now. Still good for our purposes, though. And the point of the study was to say, is nurse burnout in Pennsylvania the same as it was being found across the country? And maybe that there was a correlation between nurse staffing and burnout and patient outcomes. And so really that was the point of the study, was to kind of give this broad overview. And all the questions that were brought up in class are excellent questions for further study. Another thing I should point out is that researchers are very open to, or at least they get used to, getting their research picked apart. That's the whole review, the idea of the peer review process. The process that you guys have been engaging in the class has really been part of that peer review process. You sit back, you say, why was this done? Couldn't have been done a different way. Maybe this works, maybe this doesn't. I think I accept this result. I'm not so sure that I feel so confident with that result over here or the inferences that might be made here. So the next step then is to then, as a researcher, say, let's do a study using a smaller sample and maybe a little bit more targeted independent, dependent variables to see if we can come up with some predictive factor. Of course, we covered that a little bit last week too, but kind of continued on with that sort of spilled over into this week as well. And so in week 6, we switch focus from quantitative to qualitative. And this week, we're going to look at the Lin article and a phenomenological study that was done on a population of Taiwanese patients. Again, the article here is quantitative, so the research question is going to focus on some of those quantitative aspects of the study. That's really the main thing that we're going to be discussing here. And pretty much from this point out, we're going to be discussing quantitative or some of the more nuts and bolts aspects of research as far as IRB and maintaining, keeping patients safe in studies. That's going to be a focus of our final weeks. Your qualitative critiques were due this week. I will be reviewing those and we'll have feedback to you on those. I'm anticipating between the middle of the week and the end of the week. Of course, the next step then is to start to work on your qualitative study. Your qualitative study is going to be due in week number 7, and then you have your final exam coming up. And one more test, it's going to be in week 8. So we're kind of getting towards the latter part of class. The discussion has been great. Please let me know anytime that I can come in and clarify any of the concepts. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope everybody has a great week, and I look forward to seeing you in the discussion forums.